It was a warm afternoon in the bustling heart of Chicago. FBI Special Agent Serena Monroe, a brilliant and highly respected black woman, was driving back to her office after completing an intense investigation. For months she had been tracking down a dangerous drug cartel that had woven its influence through the city's underbelly, and she was on the verge of a breakthrough. Despite the exhaustion from long hours and relentless pressure, Serena felt a deep sense of pride in her work. It wasn't easy being one of the few black women in a field historically dominated by white men, but she had earned her spot through grit, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to justice. As she cruised along the lively streets, her mind raced with details of the case, replaying the latest intel in her head. Suddenly, flashing blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Surprised, she glanced at her speedometer. She wasn't speeding. Confused and cautious, Serena pulled over to the side of the road, wondering what she could have possibly done wrong. A police car rolled up behind her, and out stepped a tall, white officer with a stern expression. He walked slowly toward her window, one hand casually resting on the holster of his gun. Keeping her cool, Serena rolled down her window and reached for her FBI badge, ready to explain who she was. "Good afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" she asked politely. The officer, whose name tag read Officer Brock Price, barely glanced at her license and registration before barking, "I said, license and registration." His tone was dismissive and cold, and though Serena was taken aback, she maintained her professionalism. "I'm a federal agent," she said, extending her badge. "Here's my credentials." Officer Price only frowned and muttered something about needing to see her license and registration again. Serena's heart skipped a beat. Something wasn't right. She had encountered difficult cops before, but Price's cold, authoritative manner was different. "I'm on official duty," she reiterated, trying to de-escalate the situation. Price's eyes narrowed, and without waiting for a response, he ordered, "Step out of the vehicle." His voice rose sharply, drawing the attention of nearby pedestrians. Serena hesitated for a moment. She knew her rights and recognized that there was no valid reason for her to be pulled over, let alone be forced to exit her car. But as the situation spiraled out of control, she realized that any protest might only worsen the injustice. Reluctantly, Serena slowly opened her car door and stepped out, keeping her hands visible. The onlookers began to murmur, their whispers blending with the distant hum of the city. Price advanced toward her, and before she could utter another word, he roughly grabbed her arm and shoved her against the car. "Hey, what are you doing?" Serena protested, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief as she struggled against his grip. "Resisting arrest, huh?" Price sneered as he twisted her arm behind her back. "You think you can flash a badge and get away with whatever you want?" Pain shot through Serena as the handcuffs snapped tightly around her wrists. This was more than humiliating, it was a brazen abuse of power. Here she was, an FBI agent tasked with far more dangerous missions, being treated like a common criminal simply because Price refused to acknowledge her authority. People around them were now openly staring, some even recording the incident on their phones. Serena's face burned with a mix of anger and humiliation, but she refused to let him break her spirit. "You're making a mistake, Officer Price," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly with the anger simmering inside. "Shut your mouth," Price snapped. "You think you're better than everyone else just because you work for the FBI? Well, let me tell you something, you're not above the law." Serena's mind raced. She had to remain calm and figure out how to extricate herself from this situation without making matters worse. Her colleagues at the FBI would never believe that she was being arrested for no reason while on duty. Price, however, was determined to exert his authority as if this were a petty infraction rather than a gross injustice. Ignoring her repeated protests, he ordered, "Step out of the vehicle," his tone leaving no room for argument. In that tense moment, Serena's thoughts turned not only to her own safety but also to the message this abuse of power sent to every officer who dared to stand up for justice. Deep within her, a fire was stoked, a determination to fight back, to expose the rot festering within the department. Before Serena could fully process the situation, Price stepped forward, gesturing imperiously. "I don't care if you're a federal agent. Step out, or I'll drag you out myself." Her stomach churned, but with measured resolve, Serena complied, opening her door slowly and stepping out. The whispers from the gathering crowd grew louder, punctuating the oppressive tension. Price closed in, and with a rough shove, he handcuffed her, ignoring her protests. In that moment, every injustice, every whispered doubt about her ability, fused into a single burning purpose: she would not let this degradation go unanswered. Chapter 1: Into the Abyss. Days later, as dusk settled over the city's skyline, Serena's ordeal had become the catalyst for a dark odyssey that would take her deep into Chicago's underbelly and into the very heart of corruption. Now confined in a drab, aging police station on the outskirts of the city, Serena was not alone in her fight. Within these grim walls, a flicker of hope emerged in the form of Officer Devin Hart, a young man with hesitant eyes and a soul seemingly burdened by the weight of his own conscience. Officer Hart had been sent to process Serena, but as soon as he saw her, his steely resolve wavered. "Agent Monroe," he began quietly, "I'm Officer Hart. I'm sorry about all of this." His voice, soft and trembling, carried a sincerity that cut through the oppressive atmosphere. Before Serena could respond, the heavy footsteps of Officer Price, now reeking of cruelty and unchecked authority, resounded down the hall. "What are you waiting for? Get her processed." Price barked, his glare fixed on Hart as if daring him to defy his orders. Hart's discomfort was palpable. Torn between following orders and doing what was right, he hesitated, scribbling reluctant notes. Serena's eyes, filled with both pain and a spark of defiance, met his. "You know this isn't right, Devin," she whispered, her tone both tender and firm. "If you don't help me now, you're complicit in this injustice." Hart's inner turmoil was evident, a young officer caught in a system rife with fear and corruption. The weight of every unjust order pressed down on him, and in that suffocating moment, Serena's plea resonated deeply. For the first time, he began to question the integrity of the system he served. Yet the oppressive presence of Officer Price loomed large. With a sneer, he ordered, "Get her into holding already. We don't have all day." Hart's voice faltered as he complied, his pen trembling as he closed his notebook. In the small, dimly lit interrogation room, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Serena's mind churned with plans and desperate strategies. She knew that in order to expose the rot at the core of the department, she would need concrete evidence of Price's abuse of power. And she wasn't going to let this humiliation break her. After what seemed like an eternity of waiting, the door swung open. Officer Hart's eyes widened as he peeked in, a mixture of fear and hope written across his face. "I'm getting you out of here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But we don't have much time." Serena's heart pounded. Was this a genuine offer or just another trap in a labyrinth of corruption? With no other option in sight, she hesitated only a moment before nodding, trusting that even a flicker of decency was worth the risk. "Let us go," she urged softly, determination clear in her eyes. They slipped out through a back exit, an escape route carefully chosen by Hart, and into the cool embrace of a night that felt both ominous and full of possibility. The streets of Chicago, with their neon glows and restless energy, became a blurred tapestry in the rearview mirror as they sped away in a battered getaway car. Officer Devin Hart, now more than ever, was torn between his duty and his conscience. His eyes, wide with anxiety, constantly darted to the rearview mirror, as if expecting Price's relentless pursuit at any moment. As they navigated through shadowed back alleys and quiet suburban roads, Serena's mind was a whirlwind of plans and counterplans. She needed to contact her team, to alert someone who could help her build a case against the corrupt officer. Yet her phone had been confiscated, and every moment they delayed increased the danger. "We need to stop," Serena insisted suddenly, her voice firm. "I need to call for backup." Hart's face contorted in worry. "We can't stop, not yet." "It's too risky," he replied, his tone betraying both his fear and his growing commitment to her cause. But Serena was insistent. "I can't do this without communicating with my people. I need help to take Price down." Reluctantly, Hart agreed, pulling the car into the neon-lit lot of a rundown gas station on the edge of town. The fluorescent lights flickered as Serena hurried out, scanning the area for any sign of danger. There, in a moment that felt like it came straight out of a bad 90s action flick, think less Die Hard, more a quirky indie thriller, she found a payphone and dialed a number she knew by heart. The phone rang once, twice, and finally a familiar voice answered, a voice that would soon bring hope in the midst of chaos. "Serena?" the voice asked. It was Agent Carter Reed, a trusted colleague known for his resourcefulness and unwavering moral compass. "I'm in trouble. Price is corrupt. He arrested me for no reason, and now he is trying to cover his tracks," Serena pleaded urgently. After a tense pause, Carter's tone shifted from cautious to determined. "Stay where you are. I'm sending backup immediately. But you need to stay low until they get there," he instructed. Serena's heart raced, a cocktail of fear and relief surging through her. "Don't let me down, Carter. I want to just get here as fast as you can," she replied, her voice trembling but resolute. With Carter's promise echoing in her mind, Serena hopped back into the car, and Hart shifted the vehicle into gear. They sped away from the gas station into the night, the city lights dissolving into the inky darkness of the outskirts. The tension was palpable as they raced down narrow, winding roads, the fear of Price's relentless pursuit never far from their thoughts. Chapter 2, Into the Shadows. Under the vast, starless sky, the battered car hurtled along deserted highways and narrow rural roads. The rhythmic thrum of the engine was punctuated by the occasional hum of a country radio playing oldies, a mix of doo-wop and rock and roll that somehow added an ironic sense of normalcy to an otherwise surreal escape. Serena's mind whirled with memories of everything she fought for, and the road ahead represented both a chance to reclaim her dignity and a new beginning in the battle against injustice. Officer Hart, whose inner conflict had grown into a full-blown crisis of conscience, stole glances at Serena. His eyes, reflecting both the neon glimmers of passing streetlights and the dark weight of regret, said everything. He had seen too much to ignore the corruption festering in the system, and now he was paying the price for it. "Serena, why did you have to dig so deep?" he murmured almost to himself, a hint of wry humor creeping into his voice as if to mask the terror of their situation. "You're like an overzealous detective in an 80s cop movie, always one step ahead of the bad guys." Serena offered a small, rueful smile in response. "Better than being a background extra, Devin," she quipped softly, even as the adrenaline pumped through her veins. "We're the stars of this show, whether we like it or not." Their banter was brief but provided a welcome respite from the gnawing anxiety that clung to every moment. Yet, as they navigated through winding country roads lined with gnarled trees and whispered secrets of the past, the shadow of Officer Price loomed large in their thoughts. Price wasn't just an overzealous cop, he was a predator of power, a man who thrived on the fear he instilled in others. And now, his obsession with breaking Serena had become personal. The car eventually pulled off onto a narrow, gravel-lined lane that led into a dense forest. The rural setting was a far cry from the urban chaos of Chicago, and the sudden shift in scenery felt both disorienting and oddly poetic. Here, amidst towering pines and ancient oaks, the duo planned to lie low until Agent Reed's backup arrived. Serena's mind churned as she stared out at the moonlit trees. Every shadow seemed to stretch into a hand reaching for her, every rustle of leaves whispered of impending danger. "We need to figure out a way to get concrete evidence against Price," she confided in a hushed tone. "Something that'll expose his abuse of power once and for all. A paper trail, eyewitness accounts, anything that can't be swept under the rug." Devin's brow furrowed as he considered her words. "I don't know, Serena," he replied, his voice heavy with doubt. "Price is meticulous. He covers his tracks better than a Hollywood fixer. And frankly, the rest of the precinct is too scared to speak out. They all know what happens to those who cross him." Serena's eyes blazed with quiet determination. "Then we'll have to be smarter," she said. "And braver. We can't let fear win. Not when so much is at stake." She thought back to the countless nights spent poring over case files and risking everything to bring justice to those who had been forgotten. "I'm not going to let him turn this city into his personal playground of terror," she vowed softly. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by a low, persistent hum in the distance, a sound that grew steadily louder until the flashing headlights of an approaching vehicle emerged from the darkness. "Dev, did you hear that?" Serena asked, her pulse quickening. Before Devin could answer, the headlights bore down on them, and Serena's heart sank. "It's Price," she muttered under her breath. Devin swerved the car sharply onto a side road, their vehicle skidding on the loose gravel as the relentless lights followed close behind. The chase was on. Adrenaline surged anew. "We can't outrun him forever," Devin said, his voice tight with fear. "We need a plan, and fast." Serena scanned the inky darkness outside, her mind racing. In a flash of inspiration and perhaps a nod to the countless chase scenes from old American blockbusters, she said, "We ditch the car and head into the woods. It's our best shot at losing him in the maze." Without a moment's hesitation, Devin pulled the car over to the side of the road. Serena leaped out, and within seconds, both were sprinting into the embrace of the forest. The trees loomed like silent sentinels as they plunged into the darkness, their only hope being that the undergrowth would mask their escape. The forest was a chaotic symphony of rustling leaves and snapping twigs. Every step was a calculated risk, every breath a battle against panic. Even as they moved as silently as possible, Serena could feel Price's presence, a malignant force that lurked somewhere just beyond the tree line. Their flashlights barely cut through the oppressive gloom, and the only sounds were their pounding hearts and the whispered echoes of a nightmare that refused to end. After several tense minutes of running, the pair finally paused behind a thicket of bushes. Hidden in the shadows, they strained to catch any sign of pursuit. The forest seemed to hold its breath as time slowed to an agonizing crawl. Serena's hand instinctively went to her waistband, where her FBI-issued firearm rested, a reminder that sometimes the only language criminals understood was force. A sudden twig snapped nearby, and both froze. The sound was almost deafening in the silence of the forest. "Did you hear that?" Devin whispered urgently. Serena nodded, her eyes scanning the darkness until she spotted a faint outline of an old, decrepit cabin barely visible through the tangled trees. "It's our only shelter," she said softly. "We need to check it out." With no other option, they edged toward the cabin, every sense alert to the possibility of a trap. The wooden structure, with its sagging roof and broken windows, exuded an aura of abandonment and decay. Yet, in that moment, it was a lifeline, a temporary refuge from Price's relentless pursuit. Inside, the cabin was as dilapidated as its exterior suggested. Dust motes danced in the pale light that filtered through grimy windows, and cobwebs clung to every corner. Old, splintered furniture lay scattered about, and the silence was almost oppressive. But for now, it was safe, and that was enough. Serena closed the door behind them, her heart still hammering in her chest. "We'll rest here for a bit and regroup," she murmured, more to herself than to Devin. The cabin was cold and unwelcoming, yet it provided a rare moment of calm in an otherwise chaotic night. Devin sank into a rickety chair, rubbing his temples as the events of the night replayed in his mind. "This place gives me the creeps," he admitted, his voice low. "But I guess it's better than being on the run." Serena's mind raced with plans and possibilities. She knew that once Agent Carter Reed's backup arrived, they could start putting together the damning evidence that Price so desperately sought to hide. But for now, the immediate danger was all too real. Every creak of the old wood, every distant sound outside the cabin, set her nerves on edge. As the night deepened, so did the sense of foreboding. The darkness outside seemed to press against the cabin's walls, a constant reminder that Price was still out there, lurking and waiting. Serena's thoughts drifted to the countless nights she had spent fighting for justice, nights filled with pain, loss, and the overwhelming hope that one day, the truth would prevail. Now, with every heartbeat echoing in the silence, she knew that the fight was only just beginning. Chapter 3: Confrontation and Revelation. In the days that followed, as dawn broke over a Chicago transformed by both hope and grief, Serena and Devin's escape had become a catalyst for a larger, more dangerous mission. With Agent Carter Reed's backup en route and the city's underground networks beginning to stir, Serena found herself at the nexus of a movement that challenged not only the corruption within the police department but also the very fabric of a society that too often turned a blind eye to injustice. The investigation took them deep into a web of deceit that spanned not only Price's precinct but reached into the highest echelons of power. Serena's determination was matched only by the fear that gnawed at her, a fear of what Price might do if he discovered she was gathering evidence against him. Yet, every piece of testimony, every scrap of hard evidence, reinforced her conviction that the truth would set them free. One humid afternoon, Serena found herself in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a makeshift safe house arranged by a confidential informant from within the department. The warehouse, with its cavernous spaces and peeling walls, was a far cry from the pristine offices of the FBI, but it was exactly the kind of place where secrets could be exchanged away from prying eyes. Seated at a rickety metal table, Serena met with a small group of fellow truth-seekers, a seasoned investigative journalist with a knack for uncovering buried scandals, a tech-savvy hacker who went by the handle Pixel, and an ex-cop whose conscience had driven him away from the force. Each had their own scars, their own tales of betrayal, and all were united by the common goal of taking Price down. "We've been tracking his financial transactions," the ex-cop, now known as Marcus Mac Lewis, explained in a low, gravelly voice. "There's a paper trail that leads straight to him. But he's smart, very smart. He covers his tracks like he's auditioning for a role in a Hollywood heist movie." Serena allowed herself a brief, ironic smile. "Well, if he thinks he's in a movie, then let's give him a plot twist he won't see coming." Pixel's fingers danced across a laptop keyboard as lines of code scrolled rapidly down the screen. "I've hacked into some of his encrypted files," Pixel said, voice modulated to sound both cool and detached. "There's evidence here linking him to several unsolved cases, as well as financial irregularities that suggest a network of corruption reaching far beyond the precinct." The journalist, who introduced herself simply as Roxy, leaned forward, her eyes alight with determination. "We need to be absolutely sure before we blow this wide open. Price has connections everywhere in politics, in business, even in the local media. If we're not careful, he'll bury us all before we can even blink." Serena's heart pounded as she considered the stakes. "I've been in enough scrapes to know that the truth is always worth fighting for," she said quietly. "But we need a plan. We need irrefutable evidence, something that not only ties Price to his crimes but also shows how deeply he has poisoned this institution." For hours, they pored over documents, analyzed bank statements, and cross-referenced names in a painstaking effort to build an airtight case. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual hum, a mixture of hope, despair, and the unyielding will to survive. Every now and then, amidst the seriousness of their task, Roxy would crack a wry joke about the absurdity of it all. "You know," she mused, "if this were a movie, Price would be the villain with a perfectly groomed mustache, and we'd have a montage of high-speed chases and epic confrontations. But this isn't Hollywood, and we're dealing with real lives." Serena allowed herself a moment of levity before returning to the gravity of their mission. "Maybe not, but we're about to rewrite the script," she said, her voice firm. "And trust me, our story is one that people will remember for a long time." As the investigation advanced, pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. With each new document uncovered, the network of corruption grew more elaborate and more dangerous. Price wasn't acting alone, he was the linchpin in a vast, intricate conspiracy that threatened to undermine the entire justice system in Chicago. The evidence they gathered was enough to send shockwaves through every institution that had turned a blind eye to his abuses. Yet even as hope glimmered on the horizon, the specter of Price loomed large. His methods were ruthless, and he was determined to silence anyone who dared to expose him. Serena's own encounter with him, a night of terror in the dilapidated cabin, had left scars both visible and hidden. His taunts and threats echoed in her mind, fueling a resolve that burned brighter with each passing day. One fateful evening, as rain battered the city and the streets shone with a slick, reflective sheen, Serena decided it was time to confront Price head-on. With the evidence meticulously compiled and a small team of trusted allies by her side, she arranged a secret meeting in a quiet, abandoned diner, a relic from a bygone era now serving as neutral ground for those brave enough to challenge the status quo. Seated in a shadowy booth, Serena reviewed the files one last time. Her mind wandered back to that turbulent night in the cabin, to the desperate sprint through the forest, and to the countless moments of doubt and fear that had punctuated her journey. But above all, she recalled the faces of those who had suffered under Price's tyranny, and that memory steeled her resolve. "Tonight, we expose him," Serena declared, her voice steady despite the storm raging outside. "We show the world that justice cannot be bought or silenced." Her allies nodded in solemn agreement. Even as the sound of approaching sirens in her memories sent a shiver down her spine, Serena knew that this was the moment of reckoning, a moment that would either shatter the corrupt empire or mark the beginning of a new era of accountability. Chapter 4: The Reckoning. In the final act of this sprawling drama, the confrontation between Serena and Price reached a fever pitch. Under the flickering neon lights of the abandoned diner, Price arrived with a swagger that betrayed both his arrogance and the dark underbelly of his soul. No longer could he hide behind the veneer of authority. The weight of his crimes was about to come crashing down. "Agent Monroe," he drawled with a sneer that cut through the tension like a rusty blade, "I've been expecting you." His voice was smooth and dangerous, a paradoxical mix of charm and cruelty that had haunted Serena since their first encounter. Serena met his gaze with unflinching determination. "Officer Price, or should I say, Brock Price. Tonight, your reign of terror ends." The renaming was deliberate, a final act of reclaiming her power and dismantling the false identities that had shielded his misdeeds for far too long. For a moment, the air seemed to crackle with electricity as the two adversaries locked eyes. The diner, once a quiet sanctuary from the chaos of the city, now became the stage for a showdown that would forever alter the course of their lives. Outside, the storm raged on, as if nature itself were bearing witness to the epic struggle unfolding within. "You think you can come in here and rewrite the rules?" Price spat, his voice rising as he advanced. "I'm not some common thug you can take down with a few pretty words. I'm the law in this town, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep it that way." A murmur rippled through the small crowd of conspirators and bystanders who had gathered in secret. It was a moment that encapsulated the deepest contradictions of American society, a relentless pursuit of justice clashing with an entrenched system of corruption. Serena's mind flashed to the countless heroes of American lore figures from classic films, comic books, and even the offbeat humor of late-night talk shows, and she drew strength from their rebellious spirit. "Maybe you are," she replied coolly, "but even the toughest villain can't withstand the force of truth and determination." In that instant, the confrontation transformed into a battle not just of wills, but of ideologies, a struggle to reclaim a society where justice prevailed over tyranny. What followed was a harrowing dance of words and actions. Price lunged, brandishing a baton as he attempted to overpower Serena, but she was ready. Years of training and a lifetime of fighting injustice had honed her instincts. In a blur of motion that recalled the frenetic energy of a Tarantino set piece, she sidestepped his attack and countered with a swift, decisive strike. The impact reverberated through the room as Price staggered, a look of shock mingling with fury on his face. Before he could recover, Serena's allies sprang into action. Officer Devin Hart, who had long wrestled with his own demons, emerged from the shadows alongside Roxy and Mac. Together, they moved with a precision born of desperation and hope, disarming Price and restraining him as evidence. The damning files, financial records, and recorded confessions was broadcast live on every screen in the diner. In that climactic moment, Price's mask of authority shattered completely. "You'll never get away with this," he snarled, his voice now raw with desperation. But his words were drowned out by the roar of justice and the collective will of those who had suffered under his tyranny. As the authorities moved in to take Price into custody, Serena allowed herself a moment of bittersweet relief. The scars of that long, tortuous night, the pain, the humiliation, the relentless fear were real, but so was the triumph of standing up for what was right. In that instant, amidst the flashing lights and the echo of clanging sirens, Serena knew that the fight for justice was far from over. There would be more battles, more setbacks, and more moments when the darkness threatened to engulf everything. But she also knew that the light of truth, bolstered by the courage of the many, would always find a way to shine through. Later that night, as Serena sat quietly in a sparse holding cell at a reformed precinct, one that had finally begun to purge its corrupt elements, she reflected on everything that had happened. The painful lessons of loss and humiliation were etched into her memory, yet they coexisted with a deep, resilient joy, a sense of purpose that transcended the individual struggles of one woman. This was the story of every unsung hero who dared to fight back against injustice in America. It was a story of pain, loss, and heartache, but also of triumph, resilience, and hope. And so, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Serena Monroe, once battered by corruption and fear, resolved to continue her mission. With every step, she would honor the sacrifices made, expose the dark secrets hidden behind the facade of power, and remind a nation that justice, though often delayed, was never truly denied. If you like this story, make sure to like and subscribe for part 2. And please, to help strengthen our community, let us know where you're watching from and what time you're currently tuned in. Your voice matters in this ongoing fight for truth and accountability. Epilogue: A New Dawn. In the weeks and months that followed, the reverberations of Price's downfall spread through Chicago like wildfire. Under mounting public pressure and relentless investigative reporting, long-buried secrets were finally brought to light. Reforms began to take shape within the police department, and the once feared corridors of corruption slowly gave way to a new era of accountability. Serena Monroe, now regarded as a beacon of resilience and justice, continued to work tirelessly both on high-profile cases and in mentoring the next generation of agents. Her story, though marked by moments of deep sorrow and personal sacrifice, had become an enduring testament to the human spirit's ability to rise, to laugh in the face of adversity even if it sometimes meant quoting obscure pop culture references mid-crisis, and to reclaim hope from the darkest of places. And as for Officer Devin Hart, the quiet soul who had risked everything to do what was right, he too found redemption in the truth he helped unveil. Together with agents like Carter Reed and the newly reformed team led by the steadfast Agent Harper Stone, they set about rebuilding trust in a system that had once been compromised by fear. Their camaraderie, forged in the crucible of shared danger and mutual sacrifice, became a shining example of what true justice could look like in modern America. In a world where the forces of corruption still lurked in unexpected corners, the legacy of that fateful night in Chicago served as a reminder that change was possible if only one had the courage to demand it. For every individual who had suffered under the weight of injustice, the message was clear: you are not alone, and your fight matters. As the city slowly awakened to a brighter tomorrow, Serena walked the streets with a quiet confidence. The echoes of past battles mingled with the hopeful chatter of a community united in purpose. In every corner, from the graffiti-splashed walls of rundown neighborhoods to the polished corridors of government buildings, her story resonated, a living testament to the idea that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit could not be broken. And so, with a twinkle of wry humor in her eyes and a heart full of unwavering resolve, Serena Monroe prepared for the challenges ahead. The journey was far from over, but in that moment, as the city basked in the gentle glow of a new dawn, she knew that the fight for justice, truth, and dignity was a story that would continue to inspire and that its chapters were only just beginning. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey through pain, loss, and the redemptive power of truth. Stay tuned for more, and remember, in the fight against injustice, every voice counts, every act of courage matters, and every story leaves an indelible mark on the soul of America.